Welcome to Attainable Green. I'm Jess, and today I'm going to be talking about how my collection is doing for the winter season. So I'm going to share a little bit about the orchids that are in bloom, some things that are changing and shifting in my collection, and a couple other miscellaneous items. So let's start with the plants that are in bloom. Most of these are not in its full bloom status, but they're just starting out and they still look spectacular. So the first one is the Oncidium Twinkle Red Fantasy. Now I picked up this plant last year and I put it in a self-watering container and it's been doing spectacular. This year it has 6 spikes and the flowers are in bloom right now. I decided not to stake the flowers this year. I like the cascade presentation much better and I think it just gives it a nice overall effect. Because the temperature here has been slightly cooler, I haven't been able to get the scent emanating from this plant just yet, but in previous years it has a sweet vanilla scent. So this one is great for the holiday season, and I definitely love the dark colored flowers of this plant, and it gives it a nice contrast to my other Twinkle. So the next plant is the Oncidium Tsiku Marguerite. This is a Twinkle hybrid, so it does have that floriferous look of flowers, but the presentation is slightly larger and the flowers are a little bit more spaced apart. So I like the growth pattern of the Tsiku Marguerite slightly better than the Twinkles, but both plants are beautiful during the holiday season. So this year it has 4 spikes, and once again, I did not spike them up this year. I'm just leaving it as a cascade, and I'm definitely enjoying a different look of these plants. So the Tsiku Marguerite is also in a self-watering setup, and I think it definitely benefited from that. And so I'm not planning on switching up the setup at all. It seems to work well for my Oncidiums to keep them nice and hydrated. So the next plant is a Potnar hybrid. It has Tokyo Magic crossed with Martha Clarke, and this one was one of the project plants from High Desert Orchids a few years ago. When I first got this plant, I was unsure what the plant and what the flowers would look like overall, but I am definitely loving how it's maturing and developing. So this year it has 2 spikes and it has about 6 buds each. Now, because I had a couple of issues with hydrating this plant fully, the spike wasn't able to fully elongate, and so some of the buds are kind of really close to the base of the growth, and so I'm not sure if they will fully develop. Not only that, I suffered a couple problems with pests as this plant was being grown outdoors. Nevertheless, you can still see an idea of what the flower looks like, and I think as it's maturing and as it gets older, it's going to look even more stunning. It also has that splash petal look on the flower, and that gives it a very nice contrast. Overall, this is a fantastic plant, and I'm hoping next year I can get nice, strong, healthy growths so that I can also get nice, strong, healthy flowers. I think every year successively, this plant has been doing well. It's a very strong performer. It can handle a lot of abuse in that it can tolerate a wide range of conditions. And this year, it's definitely deepening that kind of rosy magenta hue in its flowers instead of being more of a yellow tone. But I'm hoping that maybe next year I'll get all of the conditions right. So not only will I have beautiful flowers, but that the presentation will be even better. And the last plant that is currently in bloom is the Holcostylis pink Yawi. Now this is a Vanda hybrid and it had spiked previously last year. And this year the spike is not doing so well because the plant is actually quite dehydrated. So I am actually quite surprised that this plant has decided to flower, and the spike itself is not doing too hot. Half of the buds blasted and the other half that remains is not that great of a show. So sometimes the plants and the presentation of the flowers aren't ideal. But nevertheless, I still love that this plant is willing to bloom and able to bloom under more stressful conditions, and I'm hoping to rehabilitate it and give it more water and hydration through the winter season to boost it up so that next growing season it will do even better. So those are the plants that are currently in bloom, and I just wanted to share with you how they're doing in my current setup. Now, a couple of things that are going on in my collection is that I'm moving a lot of my indoor plants outside, primarily my Zygopetalums, my Miltoniopsis, a couple Oncidiums. Anything that can tolerate slightly cooler temperatures is going to be moved outside. On the flip side, my Catasetums are finishing off the growth for the year. So most of the leaves have already fallen off and I already cut off the water. They're going to be dormant for this winter season, and it's about time that I'm going to be bringing them indoors so that they don't get extra water when it rains during the season, and to maintain that kind of dry period for them so that they can rest. So far, most of the catasetums look pretty healthy. There are a few that are still holding on to their leaves, so we'll see how that goes later in the year. My catasetum collection is quite varied, so the times when they are fully dormant to when they are still growing varies a lot. So there is always something going on a little bit different from the overall perspective of my catasetum collection. It's been interesting the last couple of months because I haven't been able to tend to my catasetums as strongly as I had in the past. So I'm not sure if the growth of all of these plants are at its optimal conditions, but I'm hopeful that once I check on them over the winter season, we'll see and have a better gauge of what these plants will do for the next growing season. Overall, my collection is kind of going over a big upheaval. I am changing and downsizing my collection, and for the most part, I'm trying to focus on a couple of plants that I really enjoy and love so that I can bring out the potential of most of these plants. Since it's winter, most of the orchids tend to go a little bit dormant, and so there's not much to do, so it's a great time for me to do maintenance, to really evaluate my collection and do inventory. And a lot of this stuff is quite boring, but I think it's vital just to make sure that everything stays healthy. I'm just paying attention to all my plants and that we don't get plants that are neglected. So one of the things that is interesting is that my Ophrys sphegodes, which is a Mediterranean deciduous plant, is actually sprouting right now. So it just came out of dormancy a couple of months ago, and it's now growing some leaves, so I'm hoping that it'll continue to grow from now until the early spring season when it will flower, and I'll be able to see how this plant is going to do. This is my second season with this plant in the winter season, so I'm still trying to understand how this plant grows, and it's kind of doing the opposite of what most of my plants are doing at the time. So it gives me a little bit of breathing room so that while most of my plants are slowing down growth and quieting down, this Ophrys is actually starting to grow, so I can monitor its growth pattern a little bit better, and I can focus on understanding this plant better because I have less distractions. So that's what I wanted to talk about for this update, and thank you guys so much for tuning in and watching this video, and I hope you all have a happy holiday season, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye!